So let's start off. We have Sarah Lou as your moderator and host. I'd like you to give her a warm welcome, please.
Thank you. Thank you. This is fun.
And across the list here, we have on your left, folks, is Ariel Shin. And we have Jacob Salassi. Thumbs down. Mukund Sarma. And last, folks, Tad Whitaker. And let's give them our attention. Let's give them our presence and take it away, Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Dana. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here for our panel to discuss AppSec as glue, building partnerships to scale security. I'm really excited to be up here with this panel. They have some really great success stories and insights on what has worked and what hasn't worked in their experience. So hopefully you all will have some actionable takeaways to bring back to your organizations and your application security teams. So Dana asked some questions to the audience already, and I'm going to tack on some more. I'm interested to know who's here. So can you raise your hand if you work for what you would consider a startup or pre-IPO? Wow, okay, so that's probably like a third to a half, pretty good amount. Raise your hand if you work for a larger company, like post-startup or, 500,000 plus. Great. And then two more questions. Who here is an AppSec or in something similar? Awesome. Love to see all the AppSec folks here. And then who here is not an AppSec, but you're interested in building out partnerships with AppSec? Love to see it. Okay. We got a good ratio here. All right. So a brief overview of our panel agenda. We are going to start with our classic introductions and an icebreaker, and then transition into some questions we have prepared. And Dana, if you could help let us know if there's any new questions coming in from the audience, we would love to bring those in as well. But yeah, so I'll quickly knock out my intro. Nice to meet y'all. I am Sarah Liu. I am a builder at heart, moderating this panel. I come from a software engineering background, but transitioned into AppSec when I first had a run-in with security at some point in my career. So I've worked in several industries, finance, entertainment, telecom, and I currently run the pen testing and bug bounty programs at Twilio. So turning it over to the panel, if we want to start, I guess, closest to me, Ariel, can you please give yourself a short introduction and name a person that you admire most in security and why?
Hi, everyone. Oops. Hello.
Maybe.
Is it on? Hello? Okay, it's working? Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel, and I currently lead an AppSec team focused on threat modeling, developer security training, secure defaults, and risk scoring. Prior to this role, I led the AppSec team at Twilio. Before that, I started off as a pen tester, made my way into AppSec since I found that my vulnerabilities would get reported but never fixed. So I've been enjoying the AppSec space ever since. My focus has been scaling AppSec and reducing engineering toil.
Hi, I'm Jacob Salassi. I've been on IRC since age 10. I didn't go to college. I was a network engineer. I was a software engineer. I got into security. I led product security at Snowflake for 5 years, and then I left to do startup type things, just mess with stuff with friends. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately. Yeah.
Hey, everyone. All right. Hey, everyone. Mukund Sarma. I lead product security at Chime. Pretty much do anything security really, not really specialize into one domain or the other. Pretty much open to doing anything. Came into security as a software developer, moved into traditional AppSec. Been doing that for about 10 years now. I love it.
Hey, Tad Whitaker. I'm the staff product security engineer at engine.com. Before that, I was the first security person at Circle CI, and I led that for about 5.5 years. Went and did something similar at Apollo GraphQL, and then outside my day job stuff, I used to run the Bay Area OWASP meetups for about 5.5 years, and I'm a co-founder of the Day of Security that helps women get into security careers. There's a booth downstairs. You should definitely go visit it.
And Tad, starting from your side, can you share who you admire most in security and why you admire them?
The person that comes to mind initially is Jamie Finnegan at HashiCorp. I went to Engine to be a product security engineer kind of because I hadn't done that and it was interesting, but he's the product security lead and has been at HashiCorp. And so I've hassled him for about 50 Q&A meetings over the past 18 months. He's just really knows what he's doing and super open to helping me.
Mukund?
This is a tough one. I have too many of them. But I think the one
Pick
that made the one that made the most impact, I would say, is Jeff Trudeau, who's actually also my boss. But I've been working with him for the last 7-8 years now, and I think a lot of security is actually how much charisma also you bring to the table. It's not just purely your technical chops and skills. You can get those, but to actually make an impact in your organization or to the community, I think it's also a lot about how much can you influence people. And I think I've learned a lot from him on that.
So I don't really have heroes, so I'll go ahead and say me first. But besides me, I'll just mention Ryan McGeehan, who I don't know at all, Magoo, but wrote a lot about quantitative risk. And if I thought about the person who precipitated the longest amount of thinking on a topic I've ever done, it's quantitative risk. And it started with stuff I read from Magoo. So there's that.
Person I look up to, I can actually see her right in the eyes right now, is Colleen Coolidge, who was the CISO at Twilio Segment, and has really inspired me to be an empathetic leader and to think about all different types of viewpoints, and really puts her people first more than anything else.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm gonna just call out our missing panelist here, Jeevan. He is on the signs that you might see. He unfortunately wasn't able to make it to SF today, but we have Tad. Shout out to Tad, who was so willing to sub in very last minute. We are very excited to have him on his panel with his experience and expertise in this subject. So we're here to talk about building partnerships across the organization, and I want to call back to our title, AppSec as Glue. So I want to hear, just to set the stage from everyone on this panel, what does it mean to be glue, and can you give an example? And Ariel, if we could start on your side.
Yes. So I interpreted glue as acting as organizational glue with engineering and your peer security teams. Security teams can be siloed from one another, and we can also be siloed from engineering, especially if we don't sit under the CTO. And AppSec teams are one of those teams that can act as that glue and can become the face of security for many folks who don't often interact with security. So the way I thought of it is that we have a lot of soft power and political capital that helps us get security work done without using policies or brute force at times. And we use our pre-existing relationships, and a common example is through security partners, where we partner with an engineering team to get security work done by giving them a lot more focus so that we're focusing on high-risk issues within a certain focus area.
Yeah, I would say something similar to that. And I think maybe you made the statement, which is security is accountable but not responsible. But I think you can maybe just take not a bigger view, but I think about every company has a dysfunction, every organization, especially everyone who works in a startup. I'm sure you're all living some version of organizational dysfunction. And so maybe there's two things I'll say about that. One is security is often in a position to witness organizational dysfunction and be inhibited by it, which then leads to two, you're in a position to leverage, I'll just say, remediating organizational dysfunction as a way to gain political capital, not in a perverse way. Your help in bringing the business together is ultimately key to your success and something you will be uniquely in a position to do.
I noticed a bunch of people raise their hands, probably half, that you're pre-IPO or startups, and that's definitely my area of expertise. I've never actually even worked for a public company, and so really speaking to that audience, when I think about what glue is, it's as it relates to AppSec, I'm always having to start it, and so to a huge degree, what glue means is just going in and listening to what's already there. We have Artifactory, but who's using it? Should we cancel it? Or is that actually something that we can, that a leadership person really wants to focus on? Or some form of that, but it really is, to me, going and listening, and probably wind up doing a lot of program management and vendors talking to vendors and things like that, but it's really starts with me being a listener and trying to insert myself into wants and needs that exist and trying to create some cohesion there.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of almost everything what everyone said. The thing I'll add is it's a two-way relationship the way I look at it. I think even software engineers or your other counterparts of the company can also act as glue to your security program. So I think to me, glue is whatever it takes to make that particular risk go away or reduce the impact of that ever being actioned on. So clarifying the risks to people who are at a decision-making power in a very pragmatic way, being able to tell them what are the immediate set of things that you could do to bring this down. All that stuff is usually not really considered as AppSec function in many traditional companies. It's considered as maybe a GRC function or something else. But to me, the AppSec glue function over here is the person who takes it about just finding that vulnerability. Like, what does it mean to go fix it? Can we build a quick library? Can we introduce something that can make it easier for people to onboard to that? That additional piece is what I would call as glue.
So Tad, you mentioned that you mostly have experience with startups, and Mukund, I know you've mentioned in a previous conversation that you've been the first security hire at other companies, or at least the first AppSec hire. So I'm wondering, at least from you two, but if other people have thoughts to chime in as well, what is the first partnership you prioritized at building at your organization and why?
I can go. I think it really depends on what the business is, I would say. If the business is building a product or an application and then that's the biggest asset or the risk for that company, then doing that stuff is the most important thing for that role. So for the companies I've always been in the product side or building both fintech companies. So building up relationships with our DevOps or building relationships with the team that's maintaining frameworks or anything that way you can amplify your impact, not just for one team, but to all the teams that are using the same set of underlying infrastructure or frameworks. That's the kind of way I've approached it.
Mine would be inevitably when I get hired, I wind up interviewing with the CTO or somebody like that. And so if I've gotten hired, I've already got alignment with that person. Like, they wanted me to lay out a program, an idea about how to build this thing out, and I either did or didn't pass that. And so I would say after day one, it's really trying to find like a chief architect, like at engine.com, who wasn't on my interview panel, but nothing happens without that guy's sign off. And so really that's the number one for me, because all software gets shipped through him and what he prioritizes. And so that's getting alignment with him on whether or not we do a bug bounty program, or if we don't do it, what are we going to focus on with the money and the time, and just making sure that my idea aligns with his needs to ship product features.
And I'm going to call on you, Ariel, since we've worked together for a little bit, so I know maybe you have an answer for this. But what team ended up being a surprisingly strong security partner, and how did that partnership develop?
So I worked on a project called Democratized Vulnerability Management, where we worked on centralizing our vulnerability management process. And so this affected all of engineering. And one of the things we had sought were for some strong cheerleaders that we felt would really help propel this program forward and also identify opportunities for us. And we had one really great partner that I called in my talk, Bob, who really just went above and beyond in championing our process. He really liked what we were doing with this program and partnered with us to create dashboards, not only for his team to ingest these vulnerabilities and prioritize them and talk during monthly business reviews, but also for all of engineering. He had catered it for engineering and became our engineering voice. And we didn't even have to ask him. This was something where he came to a meeting and said, look what I've made. I'm really, really excited about this program. And so I really wanted to contribute.
And for the rest of the panel, have you had similar experiences like this, or any other surprising relationships that have built over time?
Maybe I'll mention one. I guess it's not unusual to me, but internal audit. I don't know how many of you are at a company that has an internal audit function, but you probably live in a world where security is already something people don't want to do. If they really don't want to do something, it's also internal audit and face that team. But you also know that internal audit usually reports to CFO or those types of organizations and usually wields a lot of power. And so something, and again, I said I don't have any heroes, but Mario Duarte is the guy I worked with at Snowflake, my boss. He was the CISO there. And something he always told us was, you know, whoever you perceive as your enemy, that's who you have to bring in. And we brought IA in, and then we put IA to work on stuff that we didn't like, and it was like running around with a flaming sword. Really great relationship to have us and IA and us feeding IA things rather than them coming and saying, look what we found that you're doing wrong or whatever. We worked together, not in a weird way, but it worked out. We started out kind of mentally as adversaries, and I think when we lowered our egos and came together, it became like super powerful when you really wanted to get something done at a large company.
I like how you mentioned flaming sword because I feel like it fits in with the theme. So great visualization. So while you were speaking, Jacob, I'm going to pick on you. Like you were at Snowflake and you saw the engineering org grow from 100 engineers to 1,000 engineers. So that's 10x growth, crazy. So wondering what your thoughts on and how you've seen the evolution of security partnership look over time and over that scale.
Yeah. So when I think about probably a security partnership, there's a couple of ways to think about it, but when I think about like at the ground level, one thing we learned was like, initially it's good to be really hands-on. Later it's good to get every developer doing something. But later than that, as you get beyond 500, I really kind of learned, especially toward the end of my time at Snowflake, that it's actually not a great idea to ask developers to know more and more security. And there's like this arc. It goes up, it peaks, and then it needs to drop precipitously down as you get more engineers. And you have to like stop teaching them security and start delivering security this sounds like pretty cliche, but like you have to bake it into the platform. And if you're not able to do that, you're going to struggle to scale teaching 1,000 people, right? There's no like homogenous way that 1,000 people behave. Like they all behave differently, and some of them may appear actively malicious to your program. But like you just have to deal with that, and it becomes something you have to ask them to think less about. So that's maybe the dimension that stands out to me most from my experience, was how my view on what you expect developers to do changed with scale.
At what number would you say that arc peaked?
In hindsight, I can say it was probably at 500, like 300 to 500 people. We should have been already thinking about what the next generation was going to look like. And instead, like we figured it out, but we figured it out after we had already gotten there. Yeah.
So you mentioned platform and kind of throwing a buzzword in here is secure defaults. So I feel like that is really, maybe trendy is not the right word for it, but at some point you want to be working with platform teams and building in secure defaults with them. But I know we've talked about like some challenges in the past between the group of us. So I want to hear more about like how that process went building these secure defaults at your organizations, and how do you get it funded?
Yeah. Maybe I'll continue. Sorry. So I'll just say something. I'd love for other folks to say something. So secure defaults, especially at scale, my experience is organizations are not going to accept platforms or software from security by default. Like they expect those things from platform teams and they expect those things from infrastructure teams. And so there's kind of like two roads. There's probably more than two. It's never just two, but there's two I can think of, which is like you either figure that game out and you're influencing those teams' roadmaps, which is one game you can play. Another way is to become those teams and hire software engineers and hire infrastructure engineers who can ship production code. But I think the mistake a lot of teams are in like an anti-Goldilocks zone where they're not really software engineers, but they're smart and they can hack stuff together. And I think like, actually, it's not a good idea to ship that. It's not a good idea to predicate secure defaults on that. So you either need to become a credible software and infrastructure engineering team, or you better really focus on those relationships and not just, hey, we're friends, but like, hey, we have a joint roadmap and I see my stuff in your quarterly plans.
I will say, when you do hire out that security platform engineering team or whatever that name is, you still have your classic AppSec team that still needs to then act as the glue between those teams and identifying those priorities, working with those developers on sharing feedback on those platform features or what they like to see, what they don't like to see. As I'm currently rolling out a secure defaults program, we've been heavily reliant on the platform teams and working with them to get feedback on how do we get adoption to 100%? And is that even our goal, or should we be looking at other opportunities so that we actually do drive down risk in sustainable ways?
Yeah, I think it's an extremely hard problem that people don't talk about more. I think it's kind of thrown around that security falls and shift left and all of that is like things that people should do and go look at. But some of these projects take multiple years at minimum. Like I was like, think of things like, we spoke about this last year, which is like service-to-service authentication and authorization. It's a simple problem. We have hundreds of services. They need to authenticate and authorize each other. That platform took us at least like 3.5 years to build and get it out. And we had the buy-in from engineering, we had the buy-in from platform, but to get it out so that it's secure default, it's a hard problem. There are several languages, there are different tech stacks, there are things that you need to like handle, and now you are at a point where you need to like manage all those use cases. So back to what Jacobs was saying, we became that second use case, which is like we hired software engineers that build software components and deployed real production stuff. But it came with the cost of us having to maintain and manage that. And also, back to what Ariel was saying, is how do we know when all our assumptions are failing, right? We also have to like continuously test our own platform and our own solution, and also look for issues on how some of that can go wrong. So I think security falls should not be looked at complete binary, like it's there or not there. I think it's a whole journey, and you should definitely strive to getting there, but there are a lot of smaller things that you can start doing that'll have a lot more impact while you work on those. That's kind of how I look at it.
Mine would be, I tend to focus on two things right when I get there. One is just hardening GitHub access, branch protection, just really cleaning up GitHub and how that works for engineers. And then the second one is whatever cloud provider. So it could be AWS or GCP or whatever, but focusing on those two, everybody has some want or wish or need on those two. And then I also tend to go in and turn off a lot of stuff and just quit paying those bills. Like, I don't know, or somebody previously said, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had this, and they got it approved because there wasn't a rigorous budget program or something. And so going in and just turning that off and that off and that off. We'll get to it later. Let it hit the floor. Let's focus on GitHub and actually where engineers spend the most of their time, which is, GitHub and the cloud.
Yeah, definitely agree. Meet where the engineers are, and keeping it simple, I guess. Also, I love turning things off, as some people in my company may know. So we've talked a lot about partnering with platform teams, with engineers. Jacob's mentioned the audit team as well. I was wondering if we could speak a little bit more towards partnering with teams within security, because AppSec is just one group within security. I think there are many silos that live within security as well. So if we could hear from the panel, if you have any stories of partnering with another team within security, we would love to hear your experience.
I do. And well, he's sitting right there. So something we thought a lot about, and I think this is true. I think I was having this conversation with Michaela. He's right there. What I said to him was, I think TD, IR, threat detection, incident response, red team, like they all sit over here, and product sits over here, and like it's like the allegory of the cave. Like the people in TD and IR like have some idea shadows on a wall about what happens in product, but they don't have any direct knowledge of it. And so I think that heavily impacts like the quality of detections that get written, and you tend toward like this least common denominator of what incident response and detection can be. That's not going to be true for everyone. I'm sure some of you are living in some utopia, but what we realized, because we were really close and had worked together before, was like, well, this is stupid. Wouldn't it be better if like there was a full loop, and like every time we did a threat model or every time we did a risk assessment, that like those were going to turn into detections? Or rather, how could you answer the question of, what is the detection that needs to be written for that particular feature? Which I don't feel like a lot of teams even ask that. I think like features happen and detections and other things happen. So I think something that was really important for us was not just us being friends, but like having a structured system, like a process that pulled all these stakeholders in and had them more or less involved, because I don't think you do threat detections for every single feature, but you definitely do them for strategic investments and things like that. So conceiving of that and formalizing a program around how am I going to get these people in? How are we going to get the detections written? How are we going to get the response plans written? And what is the red team going to do on purpose was something that was highly valuable.
Something I've strived to do is with threat modeling, connect with the pen testing team, connect with our threat detection team, connect with our compliance team when needed. But it's something we haven't perfectly figured out yet, because even a threat model alone can take up to a month to find the right resourcing, timing, and to get it done. And someone had told me something that I thought was really great in that she currently manages 2 different security teams, an AppSec team and a threat and detection team. She says she feels like she's code switching. If you talk to an AppSec person, they want to hop on a call, they're super friendly, they want to chat with you, they want to get to know you. You talk to a threat detection team and they're like, no, backroom only. We want to have our secret jokes. We do not want to be on those calls with you. And I found that really relevant because when we try to connect all of these different partners with our threat modeling process, we don't all have the same way of trying to communicate with one another. At the end of the day, we need to identify risks and those mitigations or detections that we're going to build. But the way we go about doing it can differ on that team. And I still yet to find what type of process or program would allow us to merge all of those things. But generally, we've started with, you start with threat modeling and then we'll kick off to our partners, whether that's a Slack message request for our cloud security team to look at our Terraform rules, or with our threat detection team to look at logging and monitoring, some additional detections. We're still trying to find that balance, but we're at least having the conversation together, which is more of an AppSec thing than I would say any other type of team.
Mine would be threat detection for sure. Again, kind of being small, threat detection is the one that's kind of going out and investigating the known gremlins that everybody's like, ugh, you don't want to know about that thing over there. But so partnering with them to really prioritize what AppSec work we wind up tackling first, and being okay letting other things come later.
Yeah, I think I've had quite a bit of different kind of stories over here than some of what we've heard over here. We've actually had quite a bit of luck with the internal teams talking to each other, working on different projects together and things in that sense. So a couple of examples, I think, is we've opened up the going and writing our own alerts and prediction to anyone, not just security team, including the engineering teams if they need to and if they want to. There are times that they have come back to us and said, hey, we want to know when someone is execing into our container or our pod, and we need to get detection and alerts and that. And we're like, okay, here's a run booking. Go here, go write it up. But I think the one thing which I've always kind of struggled is how do we try to be very pragmatic and to the point, to the extent where if sometimes we don't know how to solve for it, we don't even bring it up to the engineering team or the different domain owner. And I'm like, no, actually that's where we need to kind of draw the line, because sometimes we may not know everything, but at the same time, it's our job to tell them what the risk is, and they'll either accept it or work with us or something. But I think sometimes it's been a very emotional conversation, or very angry conversation is the way I would put it, is that people are like, why do we bring this to the engineering team if we don't know how to do it ourselves? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. We got to present the risk to them. So that's some of the challenges that we still continue to face in general. But yeah, in general, if you open up the platform for people to collaborate, I think it works out well for us.
So I want to bring up one more team before we kind of pivot into more leadership influence questions. We talked a lot about security teams and non-security teams. I'm wondering if any of you all have experience with working on the business side. So people who sit on the edge, who talk to customers directly. At my organization, there's a team specifically under security who works with customers. So very interested in hearing how working with these teams might have helped influence how products ship. Have you talked directly to customers before?
Yes. So I think we have a security engineering team that we call that also builds stuff for our product. One of the few things that we build a little security center, ability to like do passkeys and all of that kind of stuff. So I think this is really good because it gives the team a good visibility into what the product development lifecycle is, and also it builds credibility for the other teams in the product and engineering teams that the security team knows what they're doing. They're able to ship stuff that is actually relevant. A lot of that is actually, we use a lot of NPS data. We are a B2C company. So we kind of look at what's the biggest reasons why people don't like our product and why they're leaving. And if there are any security related stuff there, we kind of prioritize those from our angle, working with product. So that's been pretty helpful for us.
How about from the other people on like B2B companies? What's your take?
When I was, so I got my first security job at Circle CI just because I was good talking to customers. So I was a boot camp grad. This is a long time ago. Got the entry level support job, and I just answered all the security questionnaires because I was curious what scared people. And at a certain point, I knew more than the CTO and the head of SRE about all that stuff. And so there were just a couple of last minute, oh my God, we've got this huge customer on at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. We need you to get on there and reassure them what we're doing. And so I just became that person. And then at a certain point, they just had to give me the title, security engineer. But so a lot of what I wound up doing was customer facing initially, but then listening to what those customers needed to sign the 6-figure or 7-figure deal. I was the person that went back to the CTO or the head of product and gave them the 1.5 hour long demo of it, or I guess, just like outlaid everything. And then I was the one that wound up kind of managing that customer relationship, for a while.
I'm curious to hear yours from Snowflake perspective or Twilio or any of you.
Yeah. When I was at One Medical, I worked really closely with the mobile teams, and we had a customer audit our mobile apps. And those were a lot of early morning calls, which we weren't used to before. It was like no meetings before 10 a.m., but for a customer, you'll wake up at any hour. And it was a lot of back and forth. And it was really nice that I had worked very closely with the mobile team, because it meant only I had to wake up early in the morning, not the mobile team. And I could be that interface between the teams, acting as that glue, representing the mobile team, especially when there were some like requests like disable copy and paste. And it's like, well, how will folks use password managers if we disable copy paste? And kind of working with these like medium-term solutions with customers that oftentimes have like very like strict checklists or requirements that they want. But understanding that they're not our only customer. So balancing wanting to enable the business, but also like security requirements that make sense for our apps.
I'll quickly mention three ways. So the first way was security on Snowflake. So some of us, Snowflake had a product called Snow Alert, which was like a very early proto SIM. There's much more stuff going on there now, but in the very early days, like some folks would be on the phone with customers, like more or less helping sell that into accounts and then getting them stood up. The second and third ways are a little bit more aligned with what you've heard here. There's of course, like we had a GRC team who front-ended customer conversations about like, hey, how secure is the platform? So the relationship with them was mostly about like, hey, what are the findings you're going to send me? That, we led product security. So most of that came to us because we're selling a product. So it's almost like a pen test type relationship where it's like, hey, we need to find dupes. We've already answered this. How do we efficiently make sure that the questions get answered and the unanswered questions make it to us? And then the third way, of course, is like talking customers off a ledge or whatever, right? We also had to just meet, especially in the leadership roles, like any big deal that had a question about the product. Like they want to meet the CISO. Mario, being a good guy, is like, let me bring the people who actually know how this works to the call. So we would often be on those calls. I mean, for my view and what I write on my resume is we helped close those deals because we did.
Great. So question from the audience, like many of you have leadership experience, whether managers, directors, or in a past role, something like that. So you have your own circle of influence and then like influence that you need to go up or to the side. I think like maybe the T is what I've heard it being called. So what metrics have you found most effective for demonstrating the business value of AppSec partnerships to leadership? And this is from JJ.
This is my favorite question because it's really, really hard, especially when you want to represent your partnership work. It's really hard. I think there's like an idiom in a Netflix scaling AppSec blog that said, wins are far and few in between. So it becomes really difficult to measure that partnerships are successful in ways that enable the business to say, let's keep funding this. Oftentimes we rely on qualitative data where a team says, I feel really good that this partnership is working and it's leading to a lot of great results, but that's just a qualitative statement that doesn't really say if risk has been reduced. You can start to count the number of threat models done, but that can really be difficult. So I do feel that every organization has a balance where they look to see kind of what were the projects done and what are the outputs of that. And it's not necessarily a total number of what's the percentage increase of risks reduced from the time you embedded with that team versus you didn't. They'll tend to look at the types of projects you worked, chat with the engineers to kind of see that appeal. But it's no way perfect. So if folks kind of have a better idea, I'd be interested to hear, because I've always really struggled in balancing the qualitative and the quantitative to really convince folks that this is something that they should continue to invest in.
So from our engineering partners, something that somewhat surprised me, they were often interested in like, can we show the MTTR of bug went down? Like MTTR of vulnerability, they cared about that. They cared about like the number of findings per capita. So per capita, I think, is something that's interesting because it deals with this problem of I'm always hiring more people. So I guess the TLDR from their perspective is they were interested in how it made their workflow go faster. And they didn't really care if we told them like how many vulns were in SLA, for example, which is like the classic metric. They didn't care about that. But the second thing we did, and the most powerful thing we did, and it just was a function of where I was in the organization and who we dealt with, was like, well, you know, we were delivering the set of risks to the board and the ELT, and that is how we communicated like what the success was. And it was, you know, the percent decrease in this particular scenario's likelihood over time. And I don't know, I'll just say it like, if you're influencing at that level, great, like do a good job of it, because everything is much easier when the entire C-suite agrees with you.
Yeah, I think for all the operational security stuff, we've kind of gamified that. We've built this platform called Monocle, which we've kind of spoken quite a bit and written about, which basically gives every security team and every service that's being deployed in our ecosystem a security grade. And the requirement is you got to have a B or above. If you're doing that, you're doing fine from a security perspective. And that's one metric that every time when we go to engineering metrics or things in that sense that we present to say how many teams are doing well and how many aren't. And we usually get good response for the teams that are not doing well to like go back and do it well. More at the leadership level, I think just the security residual risk or the risk register, like what are the big blocks that we actually made, we moved quarter to quarter, and what does it mean? A lot of times people also want to know how much of their team's time is spent doing security work. So we have kind of even measured that. That's been helpful to say the security KTLO work. Yes. That's been, if you present that and tell them that this has gone up or this has gone down for these reasons, that's a pretty good metric for them also. So those have been helpful for us.
Quick question for you, Mukund. If you were to rebuild another security team, would you ask your team to start building a platform to capture metrics on how effective your partnership work is, or would you start diving into a partnership immediately?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how we did it at Chime here also. It's like the first day when we started building that platform along with doing the partnerships.
Mine would be beyond looking at CVEs and vulnerabilities and dashboards. I'd always go back and look at all the incident postmortems and look at the root AppSec causes and try and find themes. 7 out of the last 10 were a result of like a leaked secret. So prioritizing that and then actually being able to show that we're burning that risk down to stop a whole class of not only just like external vulnerabilities, but all like the top 10 engineers at the company have to drop everything for 3 days and rotate this or whatever. Every leader likes to see that stuff is being taken care of.
So we have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask one more question to sort of wrap this up. But I feel like we've heard a lot about success stories and building these relationships. But as Clint has shared in the keynote, we also want to talk about failures. So I want to hear from this panel, what is the hardest lesson you've learned about building security partnerships?
Okay, there's not one way to do it. The thing that I messed up and we messed up so many times was either we went to the top, in other words, their managers, or never go to the middle manager. Pro tip, don't. Just go to the VP or whoever, or go to the engineers. Forget the rest. But it's either doing one or the other and not both, and then not over communicating. And so you end up creating these situations like we partnered with a DevX team about program analysis. We were all hyped up, a working group, a bunch of engineers. Their leadership was not into it at all, which means that as soon as priorities shifted, like no one was interested in this anymore because we didn't do enough work with the leadership saying like, hey, this is what we're doing with your engineers and this is why we think it's important and why they think it's important.
One quick thing for me is I kept going to these meetings with VPs, engineers, directors saying that, hey, this is the stuff that you need to care about. But I realized that didn't work. So I changed the question to what do you worry about from a security perspective? And that changed the whole narrative. So that worked well for me.
My big one is around security education, assuming that all software engineers want to know about security and are interested in it. I think it's pretty similar to kind of what he was saying. I just don't assume that anymore, and I just go forward with my job as is.
Mine is establish early relationships. You never know when you're going to rely on them, and start making your successes visible and loud. You want to continue to fund that partnership program. So any way that you figure out to measure your success, show it outwardly.
I'm just going to reiterate that last one. Something we were really terrible at was celebrating what we did or just talking about it. We would often see other people talking and have a cynical view of that. But like in hindsight, I'm like, you're so stupid. Just talk about what you did unashamedly.
Yeah, the Slack channel posts, or my company calls them hoots.
Right.
We got to celebrate ourselves if no one else is going to do that for us.
That's right. Especially security teams.
Okay. Any closing thoughts from the panel here? Great. Well, thank you, panelists, for your time. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. Really appreciated you sticking around, listening to us talk. And yeah, round of applause for our panelists. And thank you, Dana, for volunteering.